big red on the line. That's where I go when I'm itching to feed my 7-day addiction.
Cool.
All right, guys. So we are live. So we had a little bit of a challenge here getting started here today, but we were able to figure it out and get this started. So there was a little bit. This is the first time we actually do a Skype call. So it was something for us to learn. We've been practicing over the last few days trying to get it sorted out, but sure and behold, we had a little bit of issues just trying to get this started. But we're here today. We're here live. And we're actually on our 11th episode of our show. So this is Apollo Fishing Art of Fishing show, and basically what we like to do on our show is basically we like to spread the passion and love of fishing, and we cover all kinds of topics. We've talked about artificial, we've talked about fishing artificials, tournaments, we fly fishing, just all kinds of different topics, and really just try to increase fishermen's exposure to fishing, different aspects of it. Yeah. And today we actually got something that I'm actually pretty passionate about myself. So I am passionate about fishing, but this is something I have a little bit. I don't know what I'm more passionate about, but it's rod building. And today I've got two really amazing guests here that have a lot of experience and a lot of credibility in the rod building industry. And so actually I've got Bill Mansel here, who's on our call here on here. And I've got Alex Maslov on our phone line here. So thank you you two guys here for coming out and agreeing to our show. And let's go ahead and jump right into it. So first things first. I mean, you guys don't need really an introduction, but let's go ahead and give anyone who doesn't know who Bill is. Bill, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been building rods?
Custom rod builder for about 10 years, selling the work for about 5, mainstream for the past 2, full time. Um, if that's any custom that you want to do, we can do. There's no boundaries here at this rod room. So we do deco. Really known for the marbling. We do custom grips and skins and shark's teeth, whatever you want to do, we'll do.
So if you can think it, if someone can think it, you can figure out a way to do it.
If you can come up with it, you can make it happen.
All right, and Alex, welcome to our show. Alex, just give us a little bit of background about yourself here.
Hey guys, first off, thanks for having me. It's truly an honor. My name is Alek, and I am the CEO of North Fork Composites and Edge Rods. Those are brands that some rod builders have heard of. They're under a parent umbrella called Composite Ventures, and we are a tubular composite specialist. We make a lot of blanks, but we also make a lot of hiking sticks, gun barrels, arrow shafts, conduit tubing, anything that can be rolled up into a tube. That's really who we are. Now, we're known in the rod building community for the blanks that we make and on the rod side, but we do a lot of business with the government and with the commercial sector as well on commercial tubing. Personally, I have been building rods for about 7 years. I have been involved with North Fork and Edge for about 5 years, and I take a very minimalistic approach to rod building. You know, you can have a rod from me or from us as long as it's graphite gray and as long as it doesn't have anything more than a couple of wraps. So.
Yep. So definitely, there's a wide aspect. Actually, Bill and I were talking about this last night, and really, our rod building can be whatever you want it to be, and that's one of the things that draws people toward it so much. It's just like you can have your performance, or you can have the art part of it. So yeah, this really just kind of jump right into it. So I guess the first question, Bill, just really kind of get us kicked off is why would somebody consider building a rod?
There's a couple of reasons to building a rod. You know, it's definitely a hobby. For me, it's passion. But you know, you want to fish with something that's high quality and something not on the shelf. You know, something different, where the guy next to you doesn't have the same thing. You can't buy off the shelf. You know, per se.
Yeah, so really going out there to find something, whether it's a color combination or an actual guide or material, just choosing individual parts of it and really kind of personalizing it to your fishing style, your fishing technique, or even just your personal interests, your color schemes and things like that nature, huh?
You know, I've remodeled or rebuilt some rods that was their father's that's passed, bring them back to life. Some wall hangers, and then recently I actually built some poured some custom blocks for another rod builder out of state who sent me his mother's ashes. So he would have his mom with him no matter where he went, as long as he was fishing. And I built him just the blocks. So he could turn it into a pin, he could turn it into a knife handle, he could turn it into a rod handle. So, I mean, the availability to have something different or have something meaningful is or specialized is typically why you'd want a custom rod.
Yeah, I guess what you're kind of saying is that there's a lot of good performance rods out there on the market already that are off the shelf, and not to say that a custom rod build is any better or any worse than that, but really that personalization part of it, that's something that has more meaning to it than just say a rod per se.
Absolutely. Some guys want custom rods to target certain species of fish. Others are looking for the performance end. Others just want, to match their color coded attire.
Their football team, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. We definitely do theme rods for the fans, but there's a multitude of reasons why people seek custom rods and custom rod builders, or why you'd want to do a custom rod.
Now, when it comes to these custom rods, I mean, I come into the store and buy a $300, $400 rod. I'm gonna take care of it. Is there any extra care that needs to be taken care of with a custom rod? You know, that's not an ordinary type of thing.
Typically with your clients, if they're going to spend the money to get a custom rod built, they're going to take care of it better than off the shelf items.
Yeah.
Especially if it has sentimental value. But a lot of custom rods, no matter how upscale, how much decoration you put on it or how much decoration you don't put on it, they still outperform typical on the shelf rods because they're built one at a time. There's a lot more care that goes into them. Um, Not necessarily that they are going to, outlast another rod, but if you care for it, it will last a very long time.
So someone that's on the fence right there, so like, all right, so hey, I do want to get into building a rod. I want to learn to do it for whether I want to build my own. I want to save some money. I don't want to hire a custom rod builder. I mean, where do they start? Like, what direction would you or Alex give them to say this is a good place to start to learn how to build rods?
There's a multitude of areas to go to. I think the most famous uh, retailer that you can start with is obviously Mudhole. Um, I actually started out with a homemade setup. First one was a cardboard box, V notches. Then then I built a 2x6 with V notches in it, stand. A lot of people do build their own hand wrapper. If they're creative enough, you can score a hand wrapper for probably about $50. Um, so there's a lot of ways. There's a lot of stores out there that sell. There's a lot of independents. Like myself, and I'm sure like yourself, that cater to individuals in the local area. I cater kind of the U.S. Alex caters to some, that has availabilities for people to get into rod building with his planks and components as well.
Alex, is there anything that you would kind of direct anyone? Anything? Any additional comments that you would kind of point to someone that's looking to start building rods?
Sure. I also want to echo with Bill here, about why build or buy a custom rod. And I think there needs to be a realization to people that are in the rod building industry that it's really the custom rod builder and their customers that push the industry forward. And, if we're being honest about it as factories, when we started as a factory years and years ago, and I'm talking, let's talk about Gary's beginning, that starts as a custom rod builder that grows in popularity because people appreciate the style, the type of rods being built, the customer service, and everything that's associated with that. The truth of the matter is, if you look at the innovation that happens in fishing, you can argue that, especially in the U.S., I'm not talking about massive factory rods that are shown on display, but different grip styles, different grip combinations, weave colors, cork that's being put together with various inlays that eventually becomes mainstream. That usually starts at some form of custom rod building garage. Very rarely do you have where a factory starts to introduce, something that is completely novel. Typically the margins are very thin in the rod building industry. That there's not a lot of R&D going on. There's just a lot of repeat and resell going on. So the reason why we work with custom rod builders and make blanks for custom rod builders is we believe that they genuinely push the industry forward. As far as getting started, we did a video a while back with doing just a self-turning hand wrapper with a couple of pieces of cardboard, doing it on your kitchen table. If you want to build a custom rod, you can spend $50 on a wrapping machine, and that's great. But you can also do it on your kitchen table, and you can get a decent outcome. The key thing that we want people to do is try it the first time. It's not for everybody, but we believe that if you try it the first time and if you get hooked, then you can start expanding your arsenal.
Yeah, there's something about it. I've taught a few people how to build rods, and there's people that, as soon as you see them start trying, you're like, this is going to be the first and only rod this guy builds, because you can tell he just doesn't have a feel for it, right? But then you see other guys where, they struggle initially with some of the concepts, or just kind of working your hands, and then they progress, and you're like, yeah, okay, this guy did pretty well on his first rod, and then they're likely to build a few more rods in the future. So yeah, I think everybody needs to get out there and try it and see what they do. So and so you guys mentioned Mudhole is probably one of the big distributors of stuff that comes out here. It's kind of that's how I got into rod building, is through a mud building kit, or Mudhole rod building kit, and they've done a lot because prior to them I didn't really know much about it. It seemed like it was it was an older generation type deal, and it kind of, when Mudhole came, they started changing. They started using YouTube and social media to kind of change promoting, and now I see, I mean, everywhere I go, I run into someone that's either building rods or trying to build rods, or wants to learn because of the marketing that goes out there. So I think they have a lot of tools out there. But for someone that's looking to, maybe not build a cardboard wrapper, what's a good hand wrapper that you guys would recommend to kind of get started?
Obviously, Flex Coat's probably one of the most known companies out there in the rod building industry that has hand wrappers. I think my first hand wrapper that was given to me, or that I hustled up, was probably a Flex Coat. But all the companies have them now. Batson, Mudhole, American Tackle, Angler's Workshop, Flux Coat. I mean, all of them have their own version of hand wrappers, And we see a lot of guys that have some woodworking skills that do just go out and make their own.
Yeah, I've seen, I think YouTube is a good place to start, just like with anything, right? Whenever you want to learn anything nowadays, it's Google it or YouTube it.
Anything on YouTube.
Yeah, and so you go out there and you go over that, and you can find everyone, and everyone has their reviews and their opinions on them, and on each specific.
Yeah, I think FlexCode is a great option. You can also monitor various rod building email lists and blasts. I think there a couple of weeks ago, Pac Bay was doing an email blast where they were selling a power wrapper for something under $40. So it's definitely something inexpensive to get into. But just like Bill, I think I found an older Roger Cedar flex coat wrapper laying around in a garage somewhere, and that's kind of how it all started.
Yeah, well, that's what we use here, so well too.
And when it comes to blanks, this is more, I guess, for Alex. When it comes to blanks, is there something specific or a specific one? I mean, obviously, now that I'm more involved in it, I can tell you, that there are different models and so forth. But for a person who's going to build their first rod, like, is there something that they're looking for? Is it preference? Is it, just, is there something that you would recommend and say, hey, this is the perfect blank for you to build your first rod and give it a shot?
I will be honest we don't get a lot of first-time rod builders. It happens on occasion. Typically, we are a little bit out of the price range, even with the promos that we offer for somebody who is looking to build their very first rod. And oftentimes, it's somebody they're afraid to mess up, so they'll have to burn off the decal, and they don't want to damage a blank that they get. But I would say it depends on the area. Obviously, the number one blank that we sell is like a 7.3 medium heavy, followed very closely by maybe like a spin jig blank. But typically, we recommend, if you're building one of your first rods, to start off with something that isn't on the extreme high modulus range. If you make a mistake and you forget to tighten it down in your power wrapper, and you wake up the next morning and you realize that blank has been whacking around in the wrapper for the entire night, if it's a standard modulus blank, it could deal with the abuse. If it's a high modulus blank, or if it's something on the premium end and you've nicked it wrong, you may have an issue.
Yeah, so definitely something.
Typically,
go ahead, Alek. Sorry.
Yeah, typically, if it's somebody's first rod, they want to start off with an entry level blank, and you are right. That's where companies like Mudhole or American Tackle or Batson, they play an important role of getting folks hooked on rod building.
So Bill, you're getting someone out to start building a rod. What blank do you tell them here? You buy this, buy that. If you try to keep it under budget.
As far as blank goes, there's a ton of blanks. I think most of the biggest question is, what are you going to fish for? I typically wrap the most I wrap on an inshore $250 base bid is probably the Batson SP843, which is a medium action. If you don't know what you do like or what you don't like, a medium action is typically a good soft start. If I'm going for a kid or young adult who has not really fished before, but they definitely want their own brand or their own flavor, I do push them toward the medium heavy because it'll handle more abuse than the mediums. I rarely build on lights for the fact that it doesn't take much to break those.
Yep.
So everybody that gets a custom rod, a lot of them think that this is not going to break right. This is not going to break right. Every rod will break at a point. But because there's so many different parts and components that you got to have to build a rod, I think that's where Mudhole's kind of cornered the market by offering the one kit.
Yep.
Where you say, well, I want to go pan fishing. Well, here's a panfish rod, here's a grip, here's a guide, here's a seat, here's a tip top, here's a hook keeper.
And now you can buy it all, even with the wrapper itself, right? You can buy the wrapper with you can buy the wrapper. It comes with everything you need. So it's literally it's one click, and you end up with everything that you need to build that first rod, including the tools and that.
They've got a marketing guru who's coming up with this master plan to get rid of the most amount of components, I'm sure.
Well, whatever it is they're doing, it seems to be working. So they're definitely moving a lot of product out there. So what are some of the common mistakes you guys see or that initial rod builders or early rookie type rod builders are making?
So I think the first mistake is thinking that us experienced rod builders never make mistakes. I'll get a comment from here or there. Oh, you had some bubbles in your epoxy. It happens. Is there a gap in the thread? It happens. I think gaps is what really gets picked on the most. A lot of guys forget to pack their threads as they're wrapping guides or doing some decorational wrap or anything. I try to tell people, if you're getting into the rod stuff, create a system and follow that system, or work a technique to where, the old folk told me, bottom up, build from the bottom up, always build from the bottom up. And then that goes a long ways, because if you do, you focus on the bottom first, and you're not worried about what's on the top, because that'll come later. And one of the most common mistakes that I used to make when I first started was forgetting to do things like pack thread or one of the biggest mistakes I used to make when I first started was not checking the guides after I got done wrapping them. I was so excited after I got done wrapping them, I just wanted to throw epoxy on it because I was ready to go to the next step. Being patient and just building the rod from the bottom up and making sure that before you leave that bottom butt cap grip area, that's completely done before you move into the real seat or the marbling or whatever the next step is for you. You know.
Yeah, just one step at
You
a
know,
time.
one of the common questions that we get all the time when people have built their first rod or stopped their build, they'll build a split grip and then they'll forget about the trim rings that go on the inside. And
Yep.
what are the options of putting them back on? And frankly, your options are fairly limited. The funniest one that I have seen is somebody using a casting reel seat and ordering spinning guides. So but by the way, Bill, you're absolutely right. We all make mistakes, and some mistakes that we don't even want to admit to the point of where you're building a line of rods and you realize that it's the wrong blank going for the wrong build. But the great thing about building rods is even if you've built it wrong for somebody else, it expands your own rod arsenal. So I can tell you, I have a lot of rods, and that has zero correlation to the mistakes that I've made. And I'll stop there.
So one of the things I like to do when I'm talking about rod, or when I'm talking to rod builders and kind of getting them started, right? And that's kind of what we do, is we help them get started. I have my first build, and I keep it here in the shop, and I've since retired it by maybe like a year and a half ago. But I fished it hard for 4 or 5 years. I've been building rods for about 6, 7 years now, and so but I fished that rod pretty hard for that time. I was pretty proud of it. And over time, as I started learning more about rod building, I realized, oh, look, this is wrong. There's some twist on it. These lines aren't correct, and these spacing on the guides isn't right for this blank because I went off a template. Blah blah blah. Right. But at the end of the day, the message is that this rod served me well for a good period of time. It's not, it doesn't meet any kind of standards that I would build to today, but it was still a very good rod, and I use that to encourage people to say that you can screw up today, and you'll still end up with a rod that you can fish and will fish well, and you're going to learn from it. So
Yeah, because a lot of people say, I don't need a custom rod to catch fish, and they're 100% right. You still go to Walmart. I can still go to Walmart, and I can still catch fish with a Walmart rod. And I have my first rod that I built or assembled to a point. I didn't build the entire thing, and I try to encourage the rookie, don't get rid of that first one. That's your reference. There's mistakes there that you'll not see right now. And, I know you have these younger cats that go, no, I'm just ready to make this money. I'm ready to start this career and open my new business. And I've got to sell this one so I can buy parts to build the next one. And it's like, they jump head in where they should jump feet first. And they should keep that first one as a momentum, but as a reference tool to where they came from.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
But I think it also depends on the type of angler that they are. I mean, if you want just a functional rod, like you said, you build your first one, use it for 4 or 5 years. I mean, that's pretty much, all a functional angler is going to need. But if you're looking for someone who wants that flash or wants that different stuff, I think it's all going to depend on that particular person. I can use a rod. I don't care how it looks. As long as it catches fish. And again, now getting into it a little more and more, you can see and feel the functions of a good blank. I think goes back to that. Having a good blank and having a good rod underneath the flash, to me now is becoming more and more important. Where now I know, okay, I'm going to use this for a soft plastic. I'm going to use this for a top water, and so forth. I think, but again, it depends on the person. If you want something that looks good out there, yeah. I mean, of course, I like to look good out there fishing as well. But I think it depends on the particular angler that you're dealing with.
But I think Alex can agree that the blank is definitely the foundation of all rods. How good or bad the blank is definitely going to improve the performance and function. And Annabelle, I think what you're looking for is more of a performance rod. And you have those are the split between the clients. Some want all the bling and all the themes, and then others say, leave that crap off of there. I want it to be high end performance rods. And we have builders that do nothing but performance. Chad LaGrosse, he builds like 600 rods a year. A lot of them for FLW people, and there's nothing real fancy, but they will perform and they will catch the hell out of money making bass and fish. And he sells a lot of rods and highly desired because the market, people know him in that market, and people know that his rods perform very well for that reason, whether they're throwing plastics or swim baits or chunking frogs and stuff like that.
Now, going to what you're just saying, he's building these high performance rods, but I mean, can someone? I guess how can I ask this?
Can you have both? Can you have your cake and eat it?
Well, no, not really that. But I'm saying like someone like me that maybe has 6 months into building my first rod. Can I build a caliber rod like that because of the blank that I'm using, or does it have to do with the technique of how he's wrapping, the guides and so forth?
Well, I'm sure Alex can agree that it definitely to build a very nice performance rod, you got to have that experience
Okay.
on how to put it together. What's your thoughts, Alex?
What we say that the blank is the soul of the rod. So we spend 99% of our factory energy building a really good blank, and the rest of it goes for the trim. And if we did our proper job, really turning out that performance blank, even if you put components on there that aren't perhaps the best, that rod will perform. So for us, that's the key. The question is, Gary has this one line where he said, "Hey, if you take a piece of carbon fiber and you press your ear up to it, the one thing you can hear it telling you very quietly is that I didn't want to be a blank. That it will do anything possible. Carbon fiber does not want to be rolled up into a tube. It's incredibly difficult to make it straight. It's incredibly difficult to get the action right. But once you do, it's magical. Every factory has blanks that are, rock stars that just work with the mandrels, with the processes, and blanks that are, sitting on the secondary line. Oftentimes the challenge is how do you continue to refine the blanks that you didn't hit it out of the park with the first round, and get feedback from various rod builders and fishermen to make them better. The one advantage that we have as a factory is we always want, demand, ask for feedback from the fishermen. Now, we if we did our job right, somebody's going to come back and say, hey, this blank is great, or hey, you need to modify this action. Now, within reason, everybody has an opinion where a medium heavy is a specific action in, Texas, and it's a completely different action in Southern California. But we spend our energy and our efforts really listening to the guys that are fishing and refining those blanks, and over the last 40 years, I think the reason why, people have fallen in love with Gary and his process of making blanks is he's really listened to the fishermen of what to make something better. Now, for example, Bill, you mentioned that it's, when you build on a inshore blank, you build on the P844. Well, I can tell you who created the P844, and that was Gary at G. Loomis. I'm not even talking about that specific blank, but I'm talking about the naming convention, the popping 844. It's a quintessential Loomis blank that has existed since the early days, and he's worked with lots of guys in that Bay inshore area to make sure that he got the action perfected. And people have taken that action, have modified it, made it better, made it faster, made it slower for whatever they're fishing, whether it's porky or whatever they're throwing now. But I think manufacturing the blank and being a factory is one thing, but really listening to the guys that are providing the feedback, that are the top 5% of the fishermen, that's really what makes a performance blank. That's really what separates a lot of factories from others, is how well are you able to adjust to what the needs of the local market are.
Absolutely. So, I think we always tell people too, right? So obviously, you want to order custom rod. There's books and books of components, colors, everything you name it. And we always say before you get to that point, your first upgrade is always your blank. This is where if you're gonna spend more money, don't spend it on. It makes more sense if you're looking for performance rod to spend it on upgrading your blank than anything else that's adding flash to your rod. So. And Bill, one thing you said, and I'm trying to just clarify this. So really, on a custom rod, is it one or the other, performance or art, or I mean, do you have what's kind of that relationship between them?
Most custom rod builders say that performance rods don't have any bling. Um, I've built a lot of show pieces that performed very highly. Um, I've built a lot of rods that have marbling, just marbling on them, which made them custom. They weren't plain Jane, and I've built a lot of custom rods. And one particular rod this year actually caught the Texas state record amberjack at 133 pounds. But that same rod has been on a charter boat pulling amberjack up for 2 years in a row, and they've just put it through the ringer, So having a performance rod can still be a custom rod, but typically when you get in that little smaller weight class, and you want a performance rod in a smaller, like inshore area or lake fishing, you don't want unnecessary weight to it. And when it comes to your performance fishermen, they know I don't want a bunch of epoxy. I don't want a bunch of thread. I want it light. I want it comfortable. I want this set up. And some of your performance fishermen will actually say, this is exactly where I want my seat. This is how long I want my split. I don't like split grips. I want full grips. I don't want a 7-footer. I want a 6'8" 8.5. It comes down to like your people that get into NASCAR and your NASCAR drivers want a quarter pound of air out of their tire. Like, we sit back going, there's no way a quarter pound's going to do you any good. Some guys believe that,
Now, do you think that's just a confidence thing, or or do you think there's some real science behind that?
When it comes down to performance rods, these guys are fishing for money. If they're good, they fish. They make money fishing. So, we're not NASCAR drivers, but obviously the ones that are winning want a quarter pound of air out. So, I mean, these guys that have their quirks, we give that to them so they come back. There's a reason why they're asking. There's a reason why they're wanting. Chad told me that when he builds a rod for somebody, he doesn't build one. Typically, it's 10 to 25. So they obviously know what they want, and they know that he will give it to them, and they don't want one or two. Yeah.
The other thing, and you kind of mentioned it here, and I was planning on discussing it later, but since we're here, so what is the implication of adding additional weight to a rod have on its performance? So we talked about epoxy, decorative type stuff on there on an inshore type rod.
If you put acrylic grips on a custom turned acrylic grips on a rod, that's going to add a lot of weight to it. So some people are like, well, I want cork. And when you have a guy that specifically asks for cork, typically it's because he knows that cork's lighter than the EVA. So when you start adding weight to it, you actually start creating more fatigue on the fisherman's wrist, hands, palms, shoulders. And people go, really? Like the rod weighs so much it's going to fatigue your shoulder. It's not that the rod is going to weigh so much to create the fatigue. It's more or less these performance guys are fishing for 3 to 8 hours a day. So once you've held it, especially wade fishermen typically like a 6 to 6.6 rod, not a 7-footer. They don't like medium and heavies. They like lights. And there's a reason for that, because they're holding it and standing up and holding every bit of their gear around their waist. And sometimes they carry a spare rod with them, but they're tossing these artificials over and over and over for 3 to 5 hours at a time. So weight definitely definitely carries into the fatigue of fishing if you don't consider it.
I think that's a key also. Just the fact that you said, you don't consider it. I know, again, prior to getting into this industry, I mean, I'd go and buy a $60, $70 rod from Academy Walmart, and to me, it was the greatest thing in the world. But when you actually have something to compare to it, it's
Mm-hmm.
just, I mean, mind blowing. I mean,
Night and
luckily,
day.
I've shown to my dad, because I mean, my dad still has the old school stuff, and I'll show him one of my rods, and he literally picks his hand up like, "Whoa!" It's like, but if you don't have anything to compare to it, you don't understand what's out there and how it can fatigue you if you're fishing and casting, 3, 4 hours at a time.
And outside of fatigue, I mean, does adding that additional weight affect any of the specific of the performance of the blankets or the rod itself, say sensitivity specifically?
It's all about balance. I think Alex can agree with me on that. That if you have too much weight in the back, the tip is just going to feel real light, and it's probably going to affect your casting. Um, most of these guys that buy off the shelf has never owned a custom rod, never fished with one, and that's where they lack that experience to respect the custom rod or enjoy the true custom
Yep.
rod. Because once you get it in your hand and you're fishing with it, you're like, oh my god, never knew
Yep.
that a custom fishing rod would make this much difference. And it does. You know, um,
So, so in our factory, if you walk in, there are two statements that you will see repeatedly all over the walls, and one of them was here before I got here, and it's something that Gary has been bringing up over and over and over again, and that's weight is a deterrent to performance. The one that I added that's still all over the walls now is only the paranoid survive. So that's kind of our mantra as a company. We take additional weight on a rod and a blank incredibly seriously, and even to the point where we don't coat any of our blanks. Now, we coat other people's blanks as an OEM if they ask us to, because they think that they look pretty. But we always let them know that adding a coating to a blank adds anywhere between 7 and 11%, depending on the type of the coating it is to the blank. Not only does that alter the action of the blank, now in some cases you may want to alter the action of the blank by adding the paint, but at the same time, we build thousands and thousands of blanks a year. Not one of them do we coat for our own internal application because of the fact that it adds weight. The other thing is, Bill's absolutely right about repeatability of casting. If you have a race car that is 20% faster than your next competitor or next runner-up, you're going to win every single time. If it's 20% lighter, that means you can get to the finish line faster. A lot of the times, guys don't really put the two and two together when they're building a rod, that shaving off just a little bit of weight for repeatability of casting for the true top 5% of fishermen matters a lot. It's a big deal, and we will continue to push the message that weight is the biggest deterrent to performance that you can have in the fishing rod. Sensitivity is probably number 2, but weight is the biggest deterrent to performance.
Okay. And
Well,
so, go ahead, Bill.
a lot of one of the most repeat compliments I get is they like my grips. And the reason is every one of my EVA grips start off at a single stock round tube. I have probably 200 over my head behind me on this back wall. And, I just reach up there and grab one, slice it up, throw it on the rod. Before it leaves here, I turn it, I shape it, I form it. And like he said, anything you do to get the weight off of it. So none of my grips are typically squared off. They're all rounded. I create contours to them, makes it easier in the hand for feel, makes it better for the grip for your palm to lock. Um, Keep in mind, I normally build a lot of offshore stuff. and a lot of blingy custom stuff. So I don't really have to worry about weight because most of mine are sitting in a rod holder on an offshore boat. But I do take that in consideration of not just having a custom grip, but definitely turning some of that EVA down. And because EVA weighs a lot, if you're shipping from from China, you're going to pay. It's pretty crazy how much you're going to pay for shipping for EVA. Usually, it's about 20 to 25% of your bill of lading. You know, so you can buy a grip for $3, but it's probably going to cost you 50 cents to 75 cents per grip to get it shipped. So when you're dealing with EVA, that's why a lot of guys are mixing it up, doing EVA and cork. Or if you see them using acrylic, they'll usually have cork on the end of it to try to lessen the weight up. It definitely affects the performance.
All right. All right, guys. At this point, I want to transition over to talk more a little about blanks. So specifically, kind of what are the things that we're looking for to a blank? How do we grab a blank and know, hey, this is a good blank, or what are things that I should be able to look for when I pick up a blank, as well as as a customer, as an end user of a rod, as well as a rod builder, knowing the different types of blanks. To try to explain that, because I've seen I know several rod builders, and I've talked to them, and not to say that I know a lot, because I don't, I'm still learning a lot, but there seems to be a disconnect, or not a comprehensive understanding in terms of some of the definitions around, or some of the terminology around what a good blank is. And so I guess real simple, let's start off with something like power in action. So what exactly are we referring to, power in action, and how is that determined?
I was very fortunate that my mentor actually, his son now runs it, but started a blank company as well, where they design blanks, Matthew Bell. And, so early on, I got to learn about 20-ton, 340-ton pre-preg, mandrels, uh, a lot of things that you hit it right on the nail on the head. A lot of these custom rod builders really don't have much of a clue on how a blank is actually made. I think obviously Alek supersedes all of us in the room for knowledge on blanks, but I really think that's the lost end of it. And I don't think a lot of custom rod builders really give a crap about how things are pressed, um, uh, rolled on a blank table and baked. One of the things that uh, Matt told me is that the baking process is as important as anything else in making a blank. Because if you roll it right, and you use the right components and you use the right materials, if you don't bake it right, it's still not going to act right. So there is a lot of science and a lot of knowledge that the rod builders could still learn about the blank materials and the blank types. I prefer composite, graphite and e-glass. I really like that for my offshore. Keeps them light, keeps them strong, is stupid strong. I call them unbreakables. But when it comes to weight, I think carbon and graphite supersedes all of that other stuff. What do you think, Alex?
No, I think you're right. There are so many materials that you can make a blank out of: Kevlar, boron. And the trouble is, we build a lot of tubular composites out of that stuff. We've never made a fishing blank out of it, just because we haven't found anything that is better than either carbon fiber in the tonnage that you mentioned, either 24 all the way up to they've got 70-ton now, and doing various hybrids or various blends. But Sam, to answer your question really quickly, when people call us up and say, hey, how do I understand rod action and power? And we just tell them, look, action is where the rod flexes. Power is how much weight it takes to flex that rod. And everybody, I think, often a little overcomplicate this simple description. So a rod action is where along the spine of the blank you're going to get the bend, or the majority of the bend. And then power is how much weight it needs to really get that bend. So that's at least that's how we explain it. Now people have refined that even further and defined that into numbers of how many pennies does it take, and they call that the ERN value, and you put that on the board, and you can really go crazy about that stuff.
Well,
But
yeah, I think
really, what
Yeah, I was gonna say I think that's pretty. Actually, it's important to have it normalized in some sort of way, right? Because someone calls a blank medium, like you said, a medium heavy blank in California is different than a medium heavy blank here in Texas. So, where do we draw that? But anyways, I didn't mean to deter you. I just thought that was interesting where we're actually quantifying a medium heavy in terms of pennies. So, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and really what affects that a lot is some guys say, well, no, this action for me is a medium heavy because, it bends in the top 33 inches of a rod. And somebody will say, well, no, in my neck of the woods, we throw something bigger and there's a lot more grass. So for us, a medium heavy is something that bends in the top 42 inches, and then they start having an argument about it. But I don't know that there's a simple answer, but rod action for us is again exactly where a rod flexes along the blank, and then power is how much weight or how much force does it take to really deflect that specific part to make it go to a specific point. Bill, you're absolutely right, and there's so much that goes into manufacturing a blank that is never seen, and it's not just baking it right, but it's the right oven temperature cycle. You ramp it up to a specific point and you stop and you let the part soak. Then the other thing that people don't realize is as parts heat up, heat rises, so blanks travel up the mandrel. And if you don't do your job right, they bottom out at the top of the rack, and that's what causes corkscrews and hooks at the top of the blank. So there's a lot of processes that go into making a blank. And the sad thing about it, nothing is really defined. A lot of it is tribal knowledge, and oftentimes, we sit down and look at companies that no longer exist, and we yearn for some of the knowledge that they may or may not have gone away with them, just because none of that stuff is ever well documented. I'm sure that along the way, somebody has discovered a great way to make a blank perfectly straight, and unfortunately, it's kind of the one thing that people always search for. Do you hang him right side up? Do you hang him butt up, tip down? Do you put any tension on him when you put him in the oven? What type of tape do you use? How much tape tension? There are so many variables that it's mind-boggling of what goes in making a blank. And if you don't do your job right and you end up stressing it at one of the stations, and you break the blank, well, you all of that labor that you spent making that blank up to that point just goes right out the door.
Yep.
Yeah, and people don't want to talk about those secrets. You tape tension, how to keep them straight. Those are preparatory information that usually companies just will slaughter over to keep that hidden, because they don't want it to get out. But while Alek's on the line, one of the misconceptions with a lot of rod builders is they think they know something when they don't. When they think that a spinning rod the tip moves slow, that's an extra fast. And then a casting rod that is stupid, that's extra slow.
Yeah.
And you get into an argument, usually at the bar drinking a beer with your rod building buddy that he knows and you don't, and you don't know and he does. What is the true concept of that, Alex?
So when we talk about a slow action, and again, different companies define this in different way, and they have the right to, if that's how they're explaining it to their audience. But for us, a slow action blank is a blank that will bend all the way through like the last 12 inches of the rod. So a true slow action blank is, think of a drop shot rod. Where as much weight as you put on there, it will continue to load the blank progressively until it gets to the handle section, and you will feel it, almost flex through the cork. So we define that as a slow action. Now, what a lot of people talk about is recovery, and that's where I think they get hung up. So for example, if you take 5 ounces of weight and you hang it off of a slow action blank, you're going to load that blank, pretty close to where you've got the real seat. Now, if you take that same 5-ounce weight and you put it on a heavy action rod, most often you're going to bend, like the first 10 inches of the rod. And we can sit down, we can start arguing, is that fast? Is that extra fast? Is that extra fast? And I don't know if there's a right answer, Bill, because like I said, everybody defines their own preference of what defines an extra fast. Is it the top 12 inches of a rod? Is it the top 22 inches of a rod? And there is no standard. And one of the reasons why there are arguments is one guy yelling over another of, hey, no, this is what fast is versus this is what fast is. I think the ultimate challenge, we've tried to do the ERN thing where you take pennies and you take it on a rod and you continue to deflect it until it gets to a certain point. But people get bored with stacking pennies on a flex board, and it's always more interesting to argue.
Yeah. Now, so what we do is, we take our rods and we put the tip up on the ceiling and we bend the rod and we tell folks, the smaller the radius, the faster the rod, and the more force you physically have to push or lift, in this case with your hand or with your bicep, is that the heavier the rod. And so we have several blanks here and we let them try them out so they can see, okay, this is a slow or moderate, or this is a fast, and this is a light, and just so they can really conceptualize it. But yeah, we don't try to classify it in terms of anything, because I've seen fast rods from different manufacturers and they all bend differently, right? And it's just like, okay, well, we just and that's why I say we try not to go based on any labels. We go just like, here, get a rod, feel it in your hands. What do you like it? You don't. Well, this is what to look for. And
people often forget action and reaction. If you take a blank and you put it under load with your hand and you let it go, and if it's a slow action blank, it's going to oscillate back and forth many times. And a lot of people look at that and say, well, hey, that must be a fast action. Well, really, the reaction of the blank, or how quickly that blank becomes still, has nothing to do with the blank's action. If you take a stiffer or a faster action rod and you do that, it'll actually recover a lot quicker. So oftentimes, we try to talk people down to at least some sort of common understanding. Hey, are you talking about action or reaction? And when you're talking about power, are you talking about hip power or butt power? So I feel like when we get somebody talking the same language, we can understand what they want, because frankly, what a lot of people understand by power is, how thick the butt section is and how much lifting power a rod has, which has nothing to do with, the action and power that we normally talk about.
Right.
Right. And I usually tell people it's real simple. If you throw a lure and you have a slow action rod, that lure is not going to dance and do its job. So it's meant for, that a slower action rod may be for live bait or something that you don't want to tear up your dead bait. But, for artificials, you want a faster rod. So that way when you are doing your little jig on the end of that rod to get it to do its dance to attract the fish, the lure is working, the lure is moving, the lure is mimicking real life.
And I was about to ask that. So, it'd be safe to say that a fast action rod is going to be a rod that's, the lure is going to do exactly what you're doing on the end of the rod. So if I'm moving, the lure is doing that. And a slower action rod, you're going to have that, I don't know if I'm using the right term, but that recoil where it's going to take that delay where it's coming back, and that lure is going to have that delay as well. Yeah. Am I correct by saying that?
Hesitation. In my opinion, that's exactly how I tell and describe these things to the fishermen. So, as a custom rod builder, we were talking about this, Samuel, the last night. We want to know, what are you fishing with? Reel, species, bait. Those three things are real important to a custom rod builder, and should be asked by other rod builders to their clients, other than what color do you want, and how much money do you have to spend? Because you can't base a quote build on paper if you don't know what they're going for, especially when the client doesn't know what they want, because a lot of these rod builders, they still don't, they're still coming in after 3 years going, oh my God, what is that? That looks cool. I didn't even know that was built. What are you, I've never seen that seat before. I've never seen this. I've never seen that. That blank is awesome. Where'd you get that from? And, these guys call themselves custom rod builders, but they only built like 3 blanks, or 3 types of rods.
So I mean, I think that brings up another point here. I guess it's actually a good pivot point here. So the word custom, I mean, the word custom in itself can, just like action or power, or we were trying to describe rods, the word custom can really have a wide variety of definitions or interpretations depending on the context of the individual builder or the area that you're at. So Bill, based on your experience, and I'll ask Alex the same question: is what is a custom rod? Or a custom rod build? I mean, what do you think of when you think custom?
A custom rod is something that you come in and order, and we start the base build off of a dead blank or an isolated blank, and we call these blanks pull cues because that's what they look like. And it really doesn't matter whether you're in Michigan building ice rods that are 36 inches long and quarter-inch round, or if you're on the coast building 10-foot, inch and a quarter round, surf rods. And I build a little bit of everything. Not so many fly rods and not so many ice rods, obviously, because I'm in Houston. But um, I build. I'm pretty wide range. I do freshwater, saltwater, inshore, offshore, surf, pier. So your custom rod starts when you decide you don't want anything off the shelf. Even though those rods on the shelf started out that way too, it's just a simple blank. But at that point in time, you if you buy it off the shelf, you had no say so whatsoever in how the rod was assembled and how what components were used. A lot of misfortune or misinterpretation of custom rods is they people say, well, if I'm going to have a custom rod built, I want aluminum reel seat. Because they say, well, that's the stronger one. I've built graphite reel seats for Adam J, who has had rods just about folded end to end using 80 wides. And we use graphite seats. And they're like, well, why would you use graphite seats? That's silly. I said, because of the weight difference. It all comes back to that custom, I guess that motto that Alex was talking about. Weight plays a major role if you want to custom or non-custom in the performance of that rod, whether it's on the shelf at Academy or whether it's here in a custom rod shop.
All right, I guess my question was kind of along the conversation that we had last night was around. I mean, you were showing me some things that I've never even crossed my mind on just some of like your handles, your corks, and how you lay them down, how you induce or suck basically different chemicals or different paintings or different inks, dyes into wood. I mean, you have a full almost machine shop or wood shop downstairs where you can do. I mean, you can do anything really, and that's where I was kind of going with the question is our custom rods. I mean, we look at it. We call them now personalized type rods, right? So we have like 5 or 6 different blanks we do because we try to reduce variation. And you get to choose your components. You get to choose this and that. And yeah, you do get a custom rod. No one else is out there going to have something like that. But I mean, the world that we play or the world that I play in is very different than the world that you play in the sense that. I mean, you're doing things that are like you said, someone else told you, I've never seen this before. I've never done that. And so, kind of, what are some of the things that you do specifically that are
So my touch is I often put empty shell casings in the bottom of a butt cap to close up the hole on a custom grip. 9 millimeter, 40 cal, 223. I also use coins to close up the end of a butt cap. I built my neighbor across the street. He's a Mexican dude, so I put a Mexican coin, which I didn't have any. I had to go find them from some of my buddies. But you mentioned where we stabilize wood. We use a lot of wood burl. Maple burl is one of the most woods I use, and I'll stabilize that in my wood shop and make wood pink and red and green. Then we have the acrylics where you can custom colorize those. I often add real live shark's teeth in my shark rods, in the epoxy. Um, the sky's the limit. I mean, my Malaysian brothers that I communicate with in Facebook, they will actually take a piece of wood and hand carve a pistol grip where the real seat sits in and everything. I don't know how they do it. It's pretty amazing. Ron Weber is another cat that does 100% custom fly rail seats, and he'll just take a piece of wood just like me, turn it down, and he'll actually put that in the insert, and he'll stabilize it. Corn cob, Marco Antonio, he does a lot of that crazy stuff. And for guys like myself, man, you really push yourself to stay outside the box. We've all, as fishermen, seen what's on the shelf. So a lot of times you can go to Academy and look what's on the shelf and say, I'm going to stay away from that. I don't want to do that. I want to find something different that'll appease my customers, but I don't want what's available on the shelf. You know.
Bill, I tell you what, anytime I want to feel better, I stop by Academy or any other mainstream store and just walk around the fishing aisle.
It is a good learning tool. When I first started building rods, you have little stupid simple questions. Where did the guides go? Where did the guides go? And hence, in my personal class,
where do the guides go?
right. Well, I mean, spacing and everything else. So in my personal collection, I have over 100 rods, and a majority of those rods are not built by me. And I often get the question, I bet you don't have any ugly sticks in your collection. I'm like, I do. I have two or three. It's good to have reference points to say, this is what I don't want to do. But at the same time, if you're building something you're not comfortable with, especially a rookie, you should have other rods. I mean, you can use those for reference points, either negative reference points or positive reference points, but you can still use them.
Yep.
But I agree with you, Alex. It can be comical.
You recently just said that you made some for Adam J. Did you make the recent ones that Adam J. just got?
No, we had a little falling out, so I haven't built for him since March this year. But
Okay.
everything previous to March, I was his sole builder.
Yeah.
That's why you're seeing other, like Italio built him one, an Italian themed rod, the red, white, and green.
Okay.
And then I think another builder built him a full set. And Batten sponsors him, so he'll find him a builder, and Batten will just give him the parts
Yeah.
to assemble.
Nice. That's
I've seen some of the old stuff as well. I mean, it's good stuff.
Hey, Alex.
Yeah. So for us, I kind of had to write it down because I get involved in conversations and I forget to because everything's interesting. Any time that a customer has any input in making a rod, we just call that a personalized or a custom rod. Honestly, it's because for somebody a custom rod is just adding their name and signature to it, and it can be a factory build, and they treat that as a custom rod. And for somebody, it's torturing Bill with acid wraps and over wraps and under wraps and all sorts of layers and Tennessee cork and all this other stuff. So and then when they get it, it's still not enough. So we just define it as, hey, if you had input in making this rod and if we agree to do it for you, then we'll just call it a custom rod for you.
Fair enough. Okay. Yeah, I think just the level of comfort, kind of, like Bill said, he likes to think outside the box, but that's assuming there is a box, right? And so people like me, we play within the box where these are, and the box being anything I can order off a catalog or anything like that, right? And so that's kind of where I define it. But you have people that are a lot more creative than me, and like people like Bill, and that you're gonna go and it's what's in there may satisfy 20, 50, 60, whatever the percentage of the people, but they want stuff that's completely unique, that's not a catalog type item.
No, Sam, I disagree, and I think we should argue about it, just like about power and action and everything else. So.
Yeah.
I think even custom. I mean, I've had people come in here, and I hear them talk to Sam, and they're just like, yeah, I want a custom rod, and I want this color, talking about cosmetic. But I think the real custom is when I have, I hear Montgomery come in and talk about the specifics of how much of a bend he wants at the tip top, and the spacing and all this stuff. I think, in my opinion, again, that's the real custom
Yeah.
because it's more of a functional custom
What?
than it is
Yeah.
a visual
I think
custom.
the way I like the way Alex framed it is just anytime your customer has input
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
build, on the final product, and all that, and there's different levels to it, different levels to what that may be, but I think that's absolutely a good way, and it's kind of the definition that I think I'm going to stick with moving forward. Is if you have some kind of input in it,
it's
we're going to
key.
do it. Yeah. So
Well, the sad reality of the custom rod building is there's no successful economically uh, way to build custom rods and make money on it. So when you get to where I'm at, you're not doing it for money. You're doing it for a little bit of money, but you're not doing it for you're not getting wealthy off of it. So it really comes back down to the passion. I mean, I take it to a level that's if I got $600 out of it, I'm still not making $12 an hour when I get done with it. So um, it's just there's another thing to add, another trick to add to the build for the client to make them feel good about what they're buying. You know.
yeah, no, absolutely. So I think this is a good pivot here. So now we talked about rods and kind of the history of and some of the how to get started. We talked about blanks, kind of the being the critical component. What are things you're looking for on your blanks? Now I really want to transition to you see a lot of people out here thinking you're gonna sell hundreds or thousands of rods and you're gonna make it a full time job. And so, what's that process like, Bill? I mean, what's your experience with that?
I'm approaching 175 rods for the year. This is my largest year in 10 years building rods because I do gigs and gaffs and all kinds of other stuff too. And um, this is my last full time year being a custom rod builder.
It's tough,
I will
right? It's just
going back into the field. Actually, I done went back into the field last week and things November. Um, I love doing it, but I just can't make enough money solely doing it. And I've watched probably 5 friends of mine locally do the same thing. Oh, I'm going to build full time, and I've done it for 2 years, and people think that it's worked well for me, but there's other things that I have done to help supplement the income. Because when you're spending 12 to 20 hours to build a rod, and you're only making 150 to $300 profit, it doesn't take long to calculate that that's not going to cover your bills if you're living in a decent house and paying a lot of you know for what I do, it wasn't enough. So I will be getting out of it. And I didn't have any problem selling rods. Even though I'm not a full time rod builder as we speak, I still have 40 pending orders and people threatening me with more, which is a good thing,
yeah. So yeah,
That helps.
yeah. The
Go
big
ahead.
thing is it's not it's not something it's something that's very difficult to achieve in terms of being, say, a custom rod builder and making a living as a custom rod builder.
Absolutely. Absolutely. At least at this level. What you guys do is custom rods as well because you cater to what your customer wants, but at the same time, um, there's things that you guys stay away from so that way you can keep that economical level at achievable for a business model.
Yeah,
I think a lot of cats think that what I do is the perfect business model to make a lot of money, and I think they're misled. And some of them you can talk to and explain that to them. Others they must live it and experience it. I'm one of those guys that I wanted to live it and experience it. I've always been that way.
So,
So
Alex, do you have any thoughts in terms of whether or not a custom rod builder can make a living off of building custom rods?
only if the custom rod builder is designing production rods that somebody else is building, he can make a lot of money.
Yeah,
Or have a
I
system
have
for other people to build. Huh?
yeah, I have I have mixed emotions because I know this is live on YouTube, but here goes anyway. So about 5 times a week, I'll get a call from an individual that either has inherited some money or is bored with their current life situation and wants to get into rod building and be a business owner and a rod company owner. And several times a week, somebody will call me up and tell me, "Hey, I'm going to be the next Trey Kistler or the next Waterloo or the next name the next successful rod brand that you know." And it's interesting that so we don't typically deal with entry level rod builders. So we redirect them to somebody else, be it a mud hole or be it a Batson or Get Bit or whoever. We deal with kind of a more seasoned, experienced custom rod builders and OEM. But every year I see this trend where about a third of customers exit the business. Some customers get bigger, stay in the business, and the OEMs that are in the market, they either persist or get a little bit bigger. People think that the fishing industry is an unsophisticated industry, but it is a difficult industry to stay in, make money in, compete in. And the main reason for that is what we call the warranty tail. The longer you are in business, the longer your liability grows. If you've been in business for 50 years, what that means to a rod company is that you have potentially 50 years of, unexploded ordnance that can go off at any moment. And, 30 in a day. And I hope at some point, if not today, even in the future, we'll talk about warranties because that's the hidden,
that's actually coming up here pretty soon, Alex. It's on my list.
Yeah. Nobody wants to talk about that, but unfortunately, if you run your truck into a wall, you don't get to take it back to a dealer and tell them, "Hey, I'd like a new one, please, and could you please spend all of your time, money, and energy getting it to me quickly?" But because we're competing in the market that we're competing, where a finished, fully built rod may cost up to $30 imported, and that's the cost of the warranty. That really puts a lot of smaller custom rod builders out of business, and I think at an unfair disadvantage. So, we kind of beat people up over their warranty decisions because I think that's probably one of the biggest barriers to entry and exit in making money in the fishing industry is people expect something fairly reasonably priced to a factory rod. Two, they're going to beat Bill up and complain why everything is so expensive. Three, if something happens, they're going to turn around and say, "Hey, you built this rod. It's not my fault. It was normal wear and tear, normal use. I'd like a new one, please." And when Bill's looking at it, at the end of the day, he spent 42 hours in a 24-hour day building a rod, and he's right when you divide that $600 rod that seems expensive on the surface into the amount of hours that he put into it. He's better off getting a minimum wage job somewhere else and not dealing with somebody that's going to blow him up on social media for bad customer service.
Yep. Now, I see it all the time, and we've experienced it ourselves too, and a lot of it goes to just the inexperience of your consumer, right? So someone comes in here and says, "Oh, I like this blank," and I tell them it's a fast blank, and then they say, "Oh, but I like it because it's light," blah blah blah, and it's like, "All right, well, I'm going to build this for you." And then you build it for them, and then they come back and it's like, "Hey, it broke. Where did it break? 2 inches or 3 inches from the tip." I was like, "Well, it's a fast rod. Like, how did it break when I was out fishing? Whatever." It's like I believe that it broke when you're out fishing, but I think, like Alex said, you ran that truck into the wall there. But so Bill, in your experience, how do you handle warranties on your builds?
So fortunately, with my reputation, I don't get beat up so much for the price. So I can't quote my price. Secondly, it's real important at an experience level, like Alex said, to make sure that you are picking or helping the client choose the right blank. That's the key component to your warranty situation. I warranty everything that I build. Obviously, since I'm a major Batson guy, for the blank's lifetime warranty. Manufacturers do have defects. This is known. but it's super important for the custom rod builder to choose the right blank for that client. Not only just the achievability to perform and catch the fish he's looking for, but also some clients abuse their rods more than others. I had a cat I built for, and I gave him the first rod, and he took it, and he's like, the reel seat, doesn't fit my reel. I'm like, wow. And I was like, this is the first time I used this reel seat. I bought like 20 of them from a brother of mine, and maybe since this is the first time I've used it, I didn't put a reel on there before I glued it to the blank, So I allowed him to hold that until I built him another one, and then told him to bring it back to me. In that process, I got a phone call from another well-known rod builder out of Florida, and he's like, hey, are you building a rod for so-and-so? And I said, yes. And he goes, you need to be careful with him. After his third warranty rod, I told him, don't ever call me and don't ever order another rod. I wasn't going to sell you one. So at that point in time, I took the one back, gave him his replacement, and told him, don't come back again. Then I took that rod that had scratches on it that he continued to fish with until I built him the replacement out to the garage and put a reel on it, and it fit perfectly. So you got to be you got to try to cater to your honest clients, and I have had breaks. I've had a few breaks this year, and you got to not so much drill your client for the honest truth, because one of the boat captains I used to build for did not tell me the truth. He was trying to get a warranty replacement for his buddy on the boat. Fortunately, the owner, who is the buddy on his boat, the owner actually fessed up as to what had happened. And I'm like, I can't warranty that. If you're locking down the drag and you ball boat up and you're hung up on a rig leg and you're yanking and yanking and yanking and you're been told, stop, don't do that to my rod, don't do that to my rod, and it breaks, don't come to me and asking me for a warranty. And that's just what Alex was talking about. It's very finicky. It's a very thin line that you have to be very careful on how you cross.
Yep. It is. I mean, our experience, like you said, right? It's just there's a lot. So what we try to do to get ahead of it is, I mean, we try to do all the testing before we even issue that rod. So as soon as blanks come in, we're testing them, we're rolling them to see how they roll, we're bending them to see how they bend. Then we static load, and we actually use rubber bands, so we can actually during that loading process we can actually bend those blanks really really well. And I've had people that come through our class, and I mean they're literally pulling. They've got 2500 Nassies or Shimano reels, and they're pulling drag out of this line or this rod that's being held together. The guys are being held by rubber bands, and I'm telling them like set your hook on it, right? And I said if this rod breaks when you're out fishing, it's not the rod, it's not the build, it's something that your drag, like you said, your drag was tied down all the way, you're hooked on something, it's on you. But it's hard to tell someone that, right? It's hard to tell someone as a rod builder because of what Alex said, is like other companies have different models where their price structure is completely different, and they're charging you $30 for a replacement fee when that's when their cost is, so they're breaking even on that. Whereas a custom rod builder, even if you give him, even if you can get the blank repaired under warranty or replaced under warranty, it's all the labor that goes into it to try to offset that.
Sam, the rule of thumb that we have, and this is, hopefully now you'll go through this lens when looking at everything. If you want to know what a factory rod really costs, take a look at their warranty program. Yep. It's hard to lie. In the cost structure when you're charging $35 for a replacement rod that you've been importing when you're selling a new rod for $200. Now there's some element of that that's customer service, but if you really want to find out what that rod is really worth, just look at what the warranty replacement cost is.
Yeah, that's the direct cost on it, right? So yeah.
Yes, most often yes, with some shipping and handling
some
attached
overhead,
or
right?
something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why, personally, as a rod builder, I've kind of stuck with Batson, because we put his blanks through a tremendous, especially offshore, a tremendous amount of torture, and the success rate has came back pretty high. And as a rod builder, you want to go with a company that's going to replace those blanks if they do break, But like you said, you've got labor and thread work and all this other stuff that's tied to this blank. You don't want a blank that, oh, well, I've got a good warranty, so if it breaks, I'll get you a new one. I mean, that's your $12 an hour just went down to like $2 an hour because you had to do it twice, you know.
Yep.
I tell people, you know, really be picky and choosy. Don't go buy the $12 blank. There's a reason why they're selling those for $12.
Well, it
You know,
depends, right? The reason, like, I tell people to buy them if you want to learn how to build, how to do wrapping, if you want to
yeah,
learn how to do, if you want to learn the art, the process of rod building, start off with a small kit, and then later, like Alex said, like the biggest thing that deters people from buying some of these, some of the Norfolk blanks is the price, right? People don't want to spend that much initially if they're getting started because they don't want to screw it up, but they'll start on a cheap one, right? And they'll get started and they'll try it, and they're free to play with that as much as they can.
You know, it's amazing that our pricing structure is probably the biggest deterrent to warranties, because if somebody spends $100 on a blank or more, they're very careful at how they treat that blank.
Yep.
You know, as opposed to somebody who spends $20 on a blank. You know, they're gonna think twice about throwing something in the back of a pickup or, you know, at the bottom of a boat if they spent, you know, through their rod builder, of course, you know, north of $100 on a blank, and, you know, even more on a build. And, you know, this is where, you know, I think a lot of the premium rod builders that have the market, like Bill, you know, are lucky, because those guys do take care of the rods. And Bill, you know, I know you said this, but I hope you find a way to still keep building, even though you will have a full-time gig someplace else, because, you know, it is sad of what's happening to the U.S. building community, especially of guys that are knowledgeable rod builders. So if there's anything, you know, we can do to help and support, and just let us know. But we made a decision a long time ago that, you know, we'll never be a massive company, but, you know, the last thing that we'll do is not make a blank here, because we believe in kind of this blunt mission of, you know, we want to be the last holdout if everybody else is making their stuff elsewhere.
well, the cool thing is that me being in the electrical field, I might need to use you for conduit.
Oh, I love it. My dad is actually a administrative general journeyman, part of the IBEW something. I don't know
Yeah,
if it's 48 or.
yeah, I'm a master electrician, project manager, senior project manager at the company, and that's, I mean, the pay rate versus what I'm doing now
Oh,
is
you can't even compete. I mean, you're
no,
looking at, you know, somewhere close to 40, 50, $60 an hour if you got prevailing wage versus 12 if you're lucky, and, you know, some Billy Bob blowing you up on social media because his
you know,
boss late.
So yeah, so I think the big message is here is that, if someone is building custom rods, you're gonna make an additional, you're gonna make some spending money here, additional here and there, but you're not going, it's not gonna change your life, and it's very difficult to make a
Well,
living off of custom
Sam, the
rods.
trouble is a lot of people don't understand that even what Bill does, you know, as a custom rod builder, it really is a labor of love, you know. And
Right.
he's right. I don't know any single custom rod builder that has gotten wealthy off of building rods. Hard work, yes. Gray hair, yes. Early ulcers, yes. Wealthy off of building rods, I don't know, man. I'm still looking for him. I'll ask him for some advice.
well, you know, Brian Conley has done very well, and um, I think he is a very good businessman, and that's what served him well. And I try to use him for a good model because that Brian Conley is a very small percentage who has developed a company for selling rods here in the U.S. and made it big time, you know. And he preaches that he does the custom rods and stuff, and his rods are real nice. But um, I try to tell people the reason why Brian Connolly made it and the Connolly brothers is because they don't actually touch the rods. And I was like, you know, you unfortunately, if you want a business model that is successful, that's what you have to build it on.
Yep.
You
Yeah,
know,
it all
Yeah.
comes down to
Yeah.
scalability, right? So you're one person, you can only work so many hours, you can only flip so many rods or turn so many rods, and it just the idea that you physically are going to build all the rods that you sell, you can't scale it based on some of the pricing structures that are out there for rods, right? And what people are willing to pay for. So it's very difficult to do that. So
Well, price point is a very key component, in this business. Even though I'm a custom rod builder, I don't directly compete with the pricing at Academy. I do compete with the pricing at Academy
yep,
indirectly.
no, absolutely. It's an
Sure.
alternative. It's an option, right? So
Yeah,
it's
yeah, and like Annabelle said, that if you have never fished or have borrowed, and that's one thing cool about NFC is NFC blanks don't get borrowed by friends. If you want to, you want an NFC build, you go pay for it. And custom rods, a lot of the custom rods I build, they don't get borrowed either. But until you actually borrowed your buddy's custom rod and say, "Holy shit, I've never had one. I didn't know they could do this." I mean, you don't know the difference.
right.
So unfortunately, yes, we still indirectly compete with Walmart and Academy because they're like, why would I spend $300 when I can go spend $40?
Yeah, and catch fish,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
and so what one of our selling points, or our selling points, if you will, is we talk to people, and I've actually talked a lot of people out of buying our products and our rods, right? Based on what you want to do. I mean, I think it's better that you don't buy a rod from us right now because you're either gonna break it, you're gonna be unhappy with it, or you're still getting into fishing, and you're losing sight of the big picture. The last guy that stands in mind, he came in here a few days ago, and he's like, "Hey, I'm looking to get into fishing, and my kids are kind of at that age now where they want to start going fishing. They're asking me to go, and I'm looking to get some stuff." And I told him, I said, "Hey, man, like I wouldn't worry about spending $200 or $300 on a rod. Like just go to Academy, pick up like your kids, or do this for your kids, right? Get them out there, and that's the big picture. Get out on the water, enjoy the water, spend that time, build those moments, and then a year later, if they're into it, then you do something. If you want to make that jump, then you make that jump. But let's keep the big picture here in mind. What are we actually doing? We're buying this because we have a passion around fishing, or the outdoors, and we're willing to do this, that's the big picture, and you don't need a $200 rod to go do that.
I think at the end of the day, yeah, Bill may be competing against the academy, but at the end of the day, I don't think he is because the people going to you aren't the people who shop at academy anymore. The people coming to you are the ones who are experienced, seasoned, and know exactly what they want. You have your occasional guy who just says, "Okay, I want something flashy. It looks cool, and I can afford it." But I think at the end of the day, the custom rod builders are people who are being sought after because they want something. Some of the customer wants something truly custom, whether it be functionality or just the looks of it. So yeah, we're competing against Academy, but I think at the end of the day, people who walk through our doors are people who know what they want. And like you said, you did it perfect. By turning them, not turning them away, but just kind of explaining to them what type of equipment we sell.
Yeah, I think so. I think the big thing where custom rod builders or any rod builder has their advantage is the people. It all comes down to people, right? So when you go buy a rod from Academy, you don't know the people behind it. You don't know their story. You don't know what they're about. When you buy a rod from Bill, people are buying a rod because it's Bill, right? Because Bill's association, because Bill's his reputation in the industry, and what is like, hey, and Bill told me the same thing too the other day when he was like, hey, I've got a collection of rods that are built by other rod builders, or other rod builders ask him to build him a rod because it's again, it's that respect, it's that it's that branding, that name, it's that reputation, and that has a lot to do with custom rod builders, and so that's where rod companies struggle. Is how do you keep that sincerity in your brand and your name, and grow at scale, right? Because you can do it, and then you dilute it by bringing in a bunch of rods, and then your name, your brand just kind of washes away, right? So how do you keep that grassroots type customer relations, and just overall branding with your customers, and not really quote unquote, like, or like we said, sell out, right?
Well, and that's the one thing I think all of us can agree upon. From time to time, we do have to turn a client away or a customer away because what they're looking for is we can't serve those needs, and not because from a custom rod standpoint, but from a business standpoint, because they can't respect the product for what it is.
Right.
But the really cool thing you were talking about kids that I got involved with was rods for kids. For even though I'm a custom rod builder and the rods are expensive or whatever, I still find time through donated parts to build small rods for kids, and I just give them away.
Yep.
So that's pretty cool aspect there. But the overall thing is, we try to serve our customers and clients, to the best of our abilities, and we try to play the knowledge and experience that we have for that client when we do build these things. So, now at this point in time, I don't have a hard time selling a client a rod. We have a much more difficult time trying to pick and choose all the custom variations that we have to offer. Just like Alek, at NFC, they have a lot of blanks to choose from. So, like you were talking yesterday, that you've kind of eliminated that problem by saying, okay, we have 3 models. Which 3 do you want? And simplicity is an economic advantage in a lot of cases. To where you don't have 14 rod models to choose from that can just about do the same thing on all different levels.
Yeah, like our model is to still try to provide that custom aspect, still try to reach their customers' needs, but try to reduce variance, and because variance is expensive. What we say right now, rather than having to stock 5 to 6 or 3 or 4 different blanks that we're building on, and that those are our, the rods that we like to build on. Now I have to stock 3 or 4 other ones that may or may not sell, and then if I'm buying blanks one off, then I have to pay shipping on them. And there's a lot of opportunities you get through kind of reducing that variance.
And for me, I don't sell a lot of wood and acrylic mix hybrid handles because a lot of people don't really want to spend that kind of money on that, which is crazy because I probably have about $4,000 or $5,000 in that stuff. But what I do sell a lot of is the powder coating. Because I can say, well, I can powder coat your guides for $40, and they're like, oh, I can have pink guides, I can have orange guides. So I don't focus so much on trying to sell acrylic turned items. I offered painted blank. So I just say, okay, you want to paint a blank? How much? $40. No, I don't want to spend $40. Okay, good. Let's move on. And I don't spend a lot of time on the powder coating thing either. I don't offer the powder coating services because I don't want to be in the boat like Adam Lathrop, who used to build custom rods, and now it's all he does is powder coat guides. And now he's into the next phase where he's like, I don't powder coat guides anymore, because it's gotten so overwhelming. You have to be careful. I actually have sold turned EVA grips, and I'm like, look, I don't want to be in that business either, so you got to be careful with customizing and offering the customized things, because once you do open that can of worms, it can become more than you expected it to become.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, so we're here. Kind of ran over a little bit. I was trying to keep it at about an hour. We ran off an hour. I'm just going to read some of the questions we had here. Some through email, some through YouTube. So Victor's asking, what do you think, or what's the advantage of using an acid wrap on a rod build?
It's fatigue. It takes a lot of stress off your wrists and shoulders and elbows. And people who experienced fishermen really know this. A lot of the non-experienced fishermen think that you were drinking when you rolled the rod. It happens a lot. People tell me all the time, man, you messed up on this one. But offshore on the bigger fish, it's a tremendous relief. It elongates the time that you can fish. Also, for smaller fishing, especially if you're doing a lot of casting, the fatigue on your wrist is very increasing. And when you're fighting the fish is when you're going to be utilizing a lot of your muscles. So you're going to expire pretty quick, especially offshore, but in tournaments as well, even freshwater or saltwater. So the acid wrapping turns that casting rod into a spinning rod, loads everything underneath the blank, so therefore eliminates all that twisting action that occurs. So, I mean, it's a great advantage, and it's directly reflected into the fatigue of the fishermen.
All right.
So, Bill, I am 1,000,000% in agreement with you. I have nothing to add. The only thing that I would say is our biggest barrier. So we go to trade shows, and you're right. The amount of times that somebody will pick up a acid or a spiral wrapped or a Roberts wrap, whatever you want to call it, they'll look at us, they'll look at their buddy, and they say, "Hey, look, they got these eyes on backwards." It's probably the biggest impediment to selling a rod when somebody doesn't understand. But if we could have our way, every single rod that we would make, we would spiral wrap it.
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty bold statement right there. I mean, yeah, we a lot of people get them and they just don't know, they've never seen them, and so maybe over the next but we've seen people come in and ask for them specifically, so maybe over time that's changing. So the other question here we have here are expensive ceramic rings worth it?
In my opinion, from a warranty standpoint, no.
No. Okay.
I use hard aluminum oxide on Adam J's running 200-pound or 150-pound braid fighting big amberjack. Um, there's no wear and tear to the line. There's no wear and tear to the ring. The biggest downfall with ceramic rings, silicon carbide or zirconium, is if you drop that rod on a hard surface, you're going to be bringing it back to me to replace that guide because it's going to chip, fracture, break, pop. It's definitely going to react, and not well.
All right here. And Bill, what's the most expensive rod you've built or sold? I should say?
Well, that's a two-way statement. Sold probably 800 or 900 bucks. Built. So I build for about 10 charity rods a year. And charity rods typically, because of the charities, bring more money. My first breast cancer rod I built was sold for $1,250. And it was just a little inshore job. And then I did one for epilepsy about 2 years ago. It was on a CalStar blank. It was a 30-pound rated blank, probably a Kingfish snapper rod, and blew me out of the water. It sold for $2,700.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it makes you feel good when you can. And they didn't buy the components or anything. I just built it and gave it to them. So it's nice to be able to do things, like that. So wished I could have sold it for $2,700, but I'm glad they got the money for it.
I think a lot of that obviously goes back to the builder. Obviously goes back to you, your reputation, and what what you've provided in the past. People know exactly what they're doing, and a lot of it also has to do with the charity itself. Um, so definitely, I think that played a big part on that.
It does. I think those particular rods that sold that high, they didn't know who I was, which was kind of wild. Um, but it was the uh, the creative input that I did to those rods that probably brought the money. You know, um, the $2,700 rod went at a biker bar
Okay.
late in the night, so they were pretty lit, and they thought the thread work was pretty cool, and the colors looked pretty wild.
Well, that'll do
The
it.
breast cancer rod, I turned acrylic handles on them, and that really made people go, "Wow, this is so beautiful! I've never seen anything like this before." And it just kind of started an auction war among the breast cancer folks. So,
Awesome.
Cool deal.
which we've been building for, I think this is my 6th or 7th year for the breast cancer foundation people, the Sisters Helping Sisters that we build for. So, love it.
I mean, that's
See, and that's Sam. That's another example right there of how integrated
yep.
custom rod builders are into their local communities.
That,
And that's the other thing that's a giant differentiator from a lot of other massive companies. I mean, it's like that's the type of local love and care that it's hard to get from anything else.
Yeah, actually, that's exactly what I was going to say, Alec. I mean, that's the part that's not scalable, right? That's the part that it's difficult to scale, right? It's just you have someone here who's involved with the fishing tournaments. He knows, everybody knows him. You're calling him. He's going out of his way. You know, you call him up at, hey, something happened to my rod. I'm going fishing tomorrow. Can you help me out? Whatever it is, right? It's kind of people going. It's that personal relationship, going out of your way or doing things that are right and being involved in your local community, and it's really a big differentiator.
And again, it goes back to that's why people come back and go through the doors because yes, they're buying a custom rod, but they're also there's a level of trust, there's a level of respect, and a level of I want to give back to the people who are giving back to the community type of thing. And it goes back to you're helping you're helping each other. Um,
Yeah,
I've been fortunate to motivate the Sisters Helping Sisters thing. Um, Other rod builders to say, you know what? If Bill builds one and gives it away, I want to build one and give one away.
yeah,
So
exactly.
and it's like a virus, So it's a good thing, and just blessed to be able to influence some guys to help out like that.
Do you know Sean Porsche? Let me ask you that. Bill,
Shandu
Sean Porsche. She's out of
doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, she owned K6 Island Sports or worked there.
Oh no, I don't think so.
Okay, because she's mentioned that foundation before. I think we've actually tried being a part of that one as well. That's the only reason I asked.
Sean Peterson, Jatan Lenore is the founder or director, and
Okay.
Adam J's mother. Adam J's mother got me involved
It's a great foundation. It really is.
6 years ago. Yeah, and it's not like they go out and so their purpose is really just going out and assisting people who's dealing with the breast cancer and not like paying their monthly bills one month or giving them a weekend out of Galveston or buying them an offshore charter trip for them and their family to try to help them forget what they're going through for a day or two to let them be normal for a minute, because once you get that cancer and epilepsy and these things, life's not normal, and it's not like it was before.
Yep.
That's really cool.
Yep. My next question here that I got here is for both of you guys. So when you have a broken rod, what are you looking for to determine failure mode?
Go ahead, Alex. I know a couple of things, but go for it.
So, a couple of years ago, we called up Tom Kirkman over at rodbuilder.org, and we called up St. Croix, and we donated something like 300 blanks. And we didn't want to be the party, and neither did St. Croix, to be able to dictate what's a break. So we had Tom, between the two companies, break 300 blanks under 700 different conditions. And I'm exaggerating, of course, but like 15 different conditions: high stress, side impact, overstress, and then as well as provided blanks that fail due to factory defects. And honestly, we use that as the Bible. It's on our webpage. It's on rodbuilder.org. There's lots of pictures available. So we're fairly liberal with that, I would say, because we take that as an element of customer service. If somebody is, taking the rod and they either just built on it and it took it out the first, second time and it broke, we fall on our sword. Again, not because we're admitting liability, but because we want to be a good partner. But if somebody sends something back 2 years later, 3 years later, and they want a warranty, that's almost an automatic no-go with us, because as manufacturers, we understand that if the rod doesn't fail in the first 20 uses, there's nothing wrong with that blank, and something happened to it post, and everything else becomes for us an element of customer service. But I encourage, if you're a rod builder and if you're getting beat up on warranty, go to rodbuilder.org, go to our webpage, go to St. Croix's webpage. That article is posted. It's 20 pages long, but it's got high definition pictures of various types of breaks that were analyzed and done by independent parties. That way, nobody can, accuse us of being biased or not wanting to honor a warranty. Because honestly, it is the bane of the rod building industry, where how do you remain the good guy and still take care of the customer? And
Right.
the only way we figured out how to do that is by having somebody like Tom, a rod builder, intentionally break hundreds of blanks, photograph them, and say, "Hey, this is how these blanks broke." And out of the 20 that I broke in this specific way, this is how they all look. So it's pretty safe to say that that's probably the cost.
100% agreement with Alex. Experience is worth more than money. I have broke several rods load. So when you're building as many as I am, you can't bend and test every one that comes through the door. Just like I explain to people when they get a Batson blank, the Batson's not bending up every blank that they come through the door and test them. And every blank manufacturer can't bend every blank that they're getting to test it before it goes out the door. That's just not realistic. So how do you get the experience, like Alex was talking about, being able to identify defect versus neglect? And I think it comes down to, obviously, experience. The more blanks that you've seen broken, the more you can identify that break in the wall blank, what it looks like. And a lot of times you can see a pinch mark on one side of the blank wall, usually the opposite side that blows out. If you see any kind of nicks or marks, you know that it was pinched or stepped on or abused. If you see I can often tell people exactly where it broke because the blank material, the pre-preg, deflects and usually pulls apart and separates on the end that blows up. And if it does it above the reel seat, then typically the rod was built 100% accurate. And if it's done toward the tip of the rod, it could have been high stuck or could have been defective. If it happens 3 or 4 guides down the rung, typically it was usually from abuse. When you get into the meat of the rod, it doesn't just always just break, and you can identify the blank like Alec was talking about. How the blank comes apart or explodes tell us a lot of the story of what happened. But he's 100% right. If they fish with it for 3 years and bring it back because they broke it, you got your money's worth out of it, and something else happened. It was not defective. If it doesn't happen the first 5 times, don't try to come tell me it was a warranty issue. And my warranty is void once they sell that rod. Once it leaves the true owner who purchased it from me, I don't validate it anymore because I only obligated it to the person who paid the money for it. In my opinion.
Yeah, good for you, Bill. Our warranties are non-transferable either. We don't allow transfer of warranties.
You have to. You have to from a business standpoint. It ain't a matter of being an irreputable provider or retailer. It's liability. And at some point in time, you got to say, whoa, man, this is no. Your car ran over it. You're really bringing it back to me. The whole blank is completely collapsed where the tire ran over it. You want me to give you another one? It happens. Some of the stuff comes back.
It's still got tire tracks on it.
Yeah. You didn't want to disturb any of the evidence,
All right.
It's pretty wild, man. I had a guy come in and tell me all the guides slipped out. And Alex was talking about these multiple layers of wraps of guides, and I do that. I do that for these 130s, and you have to.
Yeah.
And each wrap is typically epoxied between layers. And the guy told me that it felt the guide came out of the wrap. I'm like, seriously? That's a Jawbone 250-pound rated thread blank. I wrapped the 4 layers of thread on that guide. It did not come out. And when he got it to me, it was a heavy boat guide, number 30 ring. And the feet on the left side was touching the feet on the right side, underneath the guide. I was like, dude, this did not come out. This did not just fall out of the freaking thread, dude. Something smashed the heck out of this rod. to get this to bend because
Yeah,
we're not.
you know what you should have asked, Bill? You should have asked when this guide met your motor. What did it say?
Yeah, like you said, this is one of those clients that takes his custom rods and he throws them in the back of his truck and closes the door and drives 800 miles an hour down to the boat ramp. And he does this because he makes $200,000 a year. And I replaced the guide for free, but I told him, I said, the next one you're paying for, you know.
So good deal. Well, guys, I mean, I was trying to keep it within an hour and a half. We definitely we overshot that a little bit, but I think it was well worth it. We got a lot of content in here. I've learned a lot, and I definitely I really very much enjoyed this part of it. And I've been looking forward to talking about rod building for a while now on this show. And I was talking to Fabian, who are some people within our network that we can reach out to. So we reached out to both of you, and thankfully both of you guys said yes, and so here we are today. So, but thank you guys sincerely very much for being part of our show, for taking the time, for taking the 2 hours, as well as some of the prep work that went to in making this thing happen today. But,
yeah, and
Bill,
I'm going to
Bill, what's
Alek.
your email address? Bill, what's your email address? I'd like to send you a note.
Oh, Mansel B at Yahoo, MANSELB at yahoo.com.
Right. Well, yeah, that was kind of where I was going.
But
so, Bill, how could people get a hold of you? But Bill just shared his email address. But Bill's also very active on social media. And
yeah, Facebook. But I was going to say that I can blame it on Alek for running over, and he can blame it on me for running over, and that way you guys aren't to blame for dragging it out.
It's all Bill's
no, it's
fault.
all my fault.
It's all
it comes down to just the moderation of it, I'm sure. And Alex, how do people learn more about you and North Fork, and where can they get a hold of you if they have any questions or want to reach out to you?
Sam, the same. NorthForkComposites.com, edgerods.com, or I'm often a troll on Facebook, so you can find me there.
Yep. So yeah, we'll definitely put links to both of you guys' websites and Facebook profiles here on our show thing. So, so guys, thanks again for coming up here. We'll definitely, I'm sure we had a lot of engagement here during the show. We saw it here. We had a lot of viewers, and I'm sure people continue watching this over the next few, or really forever, as long as it lives on YouTube. So, thanks again, guys, very much, and thanks for you guys for all watching and staying tuned. Apologize for starting a little bit late and for running a little bit over, but hopefully you guys got some very good knowledge, and if you haven't already, like if you hopefully this kind of kicks people in the butt a little bit to say, hey, I've thought about building rods for a little bit and I don't really know, but now hopefully Bill and Alex inspired me enough to, hey, you know what, I'm just go try it out here, and maybe one day I'll be acid wrapping, powder coating my own gun.
Right. My door's always open, and I appreciate the invite, to spread some of the knowledge. I mean, it was given to me without pay, so I usually offer it to the public without pay, and I have no problems at all doing so. So I'm glad to be a part of it.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks again, guys. Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right, guys. We appreciate it. We'll see you guys on the next one. All right.
Yes,
thanks,
sir.
guys. Let me see here what's going on here. All right, we'll just send it.